big university.
Of the system, and they don't have to have served parole or probation. They can register to vote immediately. Otherwise, if one has to serve parole or probation, after their parole or their probation is completed, then they can register to vote. It is just important that we know and that we share with others that someone who does have a felony in their past can indeed vote. Because it's a myth, and it's just people just assume that if you've had a felony in the past, then you've lost that right altogether. Because that's the way it is in many states, but not in North Carolina. When you've done your time, you get your right back to vote in North Carolina. And of course, you have to have been a resident of the county for 30 days. Where are some places you can register? At the DMV, of course, if you go to renew your license or to get a license or to get a state ID, you can register. They're supposed to ask you by law, have you registered to vote? And if you'd like to, and then if you do, then they're supposed to register, and that is transferred to us, submitted to us electronically. And the same if a person is getting any type of public assistance or disability. We have our forms in the State Board of Elections, the libraries, public high schools and colleges, and the same for Employment Security Commission. They're supposed to be able to transfer that to us also. And then we have all kinds of voter registration drives going on throughout the counties, and I know you all know about that. Any questions thus far?
Tell me, I was number 18 at the time of the election, or turn to 18 by the next general election.
18 at the time of the election, or will turn 18 by the next general election. What that meant was, this is something, that line is still up there. Maybe I should have taken it out. Thank you, so I'll make sure. And what that means is, I had this up here during the primaries.
Okay.
So during the primaries, if a person was going to turn 18 by the general election, they could still vote in the primaries, even though they weren't 18 yet.
Primary.
So we had some 17-year-olds voting during the primary because they were going to be 18 on or before the general election. So they got the opportunity to help decide who was going to be on the ballots in November.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Please know that we don't have online voter registration in North Carolina. Okay? Working on it, but not so yet. Hopefully, during the next 2 years, when we have voting, it's possible. We're working on it, but we don't have online voter registration. And so people have been going to websites and thinking that they are registering to vote in North Carolina, only to find out that that's not so. So, whenever you hear that, make sure that you let people know we don't have such a thing in North Carolina. And those websites that tell you you can register here, and we will send your information to the State Board of Elections, North Carolina State Board of Elections, and you'll be registered. Just let people know that that's not so. Don't believe that. And it indeed is happening. A misdemeanor, I want to make sure everybody understands, the only persons that lose their right to vote are those who are convicted of a felony, not a misdemeanor, okay? In addition, if a person is in jail and they are awaiting trial, they haven't been convicted yet. Okay? So they can still vote. Okay, you have to have been convicted of a felony. So how do those persons in jail vote? Well, they've got to depend on somebody to get them a voter registration form, okay? As well as depend upon someone to offer them a request for an absentee ballot. They can request it themselves, but the law does not require that the officials who are over the jail, the law does not require that they provide them with a voter registration form or with a request for an absentee ballot, so that they can participate in it. But they can ask for it, and they will receive it. Okay? The information that I've got up here is just to inform people about the laws related to those persons with a felony history. And I'll just say in general that that it is the the Department of Public Safety, the Office of Administrative Officer of the Courts, and the State Board of Elections by law are required to have a program in place to make sure that when people are released from the system, that they know when they can register to vote. So there are laws in place, okay, to take care of that. But I will say that at a minimum, that they can be provided a written notice to let them know that their citizenship has been restored. And when is that written notice usually given? Usually after they're off probation and they get a letter from the probation officer or their parole officer saying, okay, you're off probation now, you can go register to vote. That is the minimum, okay? And so I just want you to know that that is, the minimum is usually what is done, how it's done, versus someone letting them know before they come out of the system altogether that that is something that they can look forward to doing. So that's the information that we can share within our communities to let people know, you know, in case they don't. Because a lot of them do, because if that letter is sent out after they're released, they may be at a different address. And when it's returned to sender, as long as they send it, if it's returned to sender, they feel like they've done their job, and by law they have. Now, college students. Everybody wants to know, where do college students vote? It's not as difficult as people think it is. It's really quite simple. College students vote wherever they call home. Point blank. That's all it is to it. I know there's a lot of information up there, there's a lot in the statutes, but when you read everything that's in the statutes, it all boils down to which place you're going to call home. Okay. So if you're living on campus and you're living in a dorm and you say, I'm grown, and this is what I call my home. My parents live there, but I'm grown, and this is my home. Then you can register to vote in the county where you attend college. Your parents might not say you're grown, but you may say you're grown. And that is where you can register to vote and vote. So college students don't have to run back home across the state, or they don't have to request an absentee ballot in order to vote in the county where they grew up, okay? They have that option, they can, but they can do the easy thing, and they can vote in the county where they go to school, so that on election day they're not running around everywhere or stressing out, making sure that their ballot gets in. And what's the easiest way right now, for where we are right now, what is the easiest way for college students to vote? Go to early voting. That's it for college students right now. That is the easiest way to do it, because they will register and they will vote on the same day. Just a little bit about homeless persons. I like to talk about the homeless because that is the population that is generally kind of left out during the election process. Okay? So I just, say a little bit about that. For people who work with the homeless population, I've worked with them as a social worker, and they are somewhat difficult to deal with because they have so many issues. The first thing I let people know is when you're filling out that voter registration form, their residence is wherever they lay their head. So if they sleep under the Boiling Street Bridge, that is their residence. And whatever precinct the Boiling Street Bridge is in, that is where they vote. And that is what their voter registration card tells them. But what about the voter registration card that they get in the mail? Where is it going to go? Can't go to the Boiling Street Bridge. So you have to work with them and talk with them a little bit enough to find out, where does your mail go? Sometimes shelters allow them to receive their mail there. Sometimes there are churches that allow them to receive their mail there. Sometimes there are businesses that allow homeless persons to come and pick up their mail from there. That's just it's just the kindness or generosity that is sometimes allowed. So you have to take the time to find out where you get your mail at. Okay. However, there are homeless persons who may not use any of those contacts for mail purposes. And despite the tension in the relationship that they may have with their relatives, you may find, as I have, that their mailing address is with a near relative. You may not talk to them often, may not have seen them in a long time, but if they've got some important, wherever they want their important mail to go, they don't want it bouncing around people. They don't even want it going to a social worker. They want it to go to that one place where if they want to go back and make sure they get something, that's where it is with the near relative. And so when you can get that information, you can help them, because we want to make sure they participate in the voting process. You can help them with the completion of the request for an absentee ballot. And why do I say that? Because after you have completed that, help them complete that voter registration form and sent it in, and they get registered, you got a fine during early voting or on election day. And you might not find them under the Bowling Street Bridge. However, if when you help them complete that voter registration form, then you also help them with the request for an absentee ballot, then you are assuring that they get the opportunity to participate in the voting process. And how do you do that? Well, the first part of this form says, who's the voter? And you write down that voter's information, that homeless person's information. Okay? Then it says, okay, that's the voter. But where does the voter want his ballot to go to? That voter's going to say, I want my ballot to go to my near relative. Then, so say, who's that near relative? This form tells us who's considered a near relative. A near relative is a spouse, a child, a son-in-law, a daughter-in-law, a grandchild, a brother or a sister, a parent, a stepchild, a grandparent, a mother-in-law, a father-in-law, or a step-parent. And these are persons who have an interest in that homeless person. Okay? And so that ballot can go to that near relative who can vote that ballot in a manner that is in the best interest of that homeless person. The request for an absentee ballot allows a near relative to request a ballot on behalf of the voter who needs their assistance in making sure that they are counted in the voting process. So that's what I wanted to share with you about homeless persons. And the statute does indicate that when we're doing that voter registration form, that where their residence is indeed where they lay their head. Voter lookup. Voter lookup is a very helpful. Yes,
do you mind if I ask a question? I've recently become power of attorney for my parents. Am I
a legal guardian also?
Well, I guess so, but I know I've got power of attorney.
Uh-huh.
Can I vote their ballots?
Yes, ma'am.
As power of attorney?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. You can request those ballots.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I can request them. Can I vote
yes,
for them?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And to speak of that,
does that mean she can mark the ballot?
Yes,
the way
sir,
they
she
have
can.
to mark it?
Yes,
She
yes,
marks
sir,
it
she
without permission.
well, she has power of attorney, so yes, she can do that. Right. She's got power of attorney, yeah. And with the other relatives, you're gonna make sure that you have worked that out. If you're gonna vote your mom's ballot, it's because your mama wants you to vote that ballot. Okay. And we'll get to that a little bit later, because we'll talk to that a little bit later. But let me cover that. You said power of attorney. When I was doing a forum down in Vance County, somebody said to me they were very, very upset. We all have our opinions about how things can go. But someone was very upset because they were at the voting site back in March, and a man came in there with his son, who she said appeared to her to have cerebral palsy, and that, you know, that he may have been mentally retarded or have cerebral palsy, and she said that the man took his son, you know, into the voting booth, and, you know, he took his hand and he helped him vote the ballot. She said it just really, really upset me, because I don't think that anybody who doesn't have any sense should be able to vote a ballot. And so what I want people to understand is that you don't lose your right. If you register to vote, you don't, you know, if you don't use, you know, we're not restricted in North Carolina from registering to vote if you are a resident of North Carolina. The only persons who are incompetent that cannot register to vote, be a part of the voting process, is those who have been deemed incompetent by a judge, and the judge put it in the order that that includes voting. And judges know that when you deem someone incompetent legally, you must specifically state that they cannot participate in the voting process. And if that is not the part of an incompetent order, then that person does not lose their right to vote. Because oftentimes people can be incompetent about many things, okay? Some decisions, but voting is not one that a right that someone loses, okay? Unless the judge states it in the order. With that being said, there are only two persons in North Carolina who cannot participate in the voting process. That is one who has an order of incompetence where the judge stated that they cannot participate in it, and a person who is serving a felony sentence. So other than that, if a person is a resident of North Carolina, I don't care what their condition is. It does not matter. They have the right to vote in North Carolina. And so I said to her, well, you know, some may regard me as stupid. Just depends on when they hear me talk or we're in a discussion. They may think that I'm stupid. They may think that I'm not competent to make decisions. But that doesn't change the fact that I got the right to vote. And the law allows, the law has allowed a process whereby those of us who are deemed ignorant, those of us who are deemed stupid, and those of us who are deemed unworthy can still cast a ballot with the help of a near relative. And I'm thankful for that. Voter Lookup. Voter Lookup is very helpful because it helps people find out what their status is before they go to vote. Now I'm going to tell you, people often get frustrated when they get to the polls and somebody says provisional ballot. We have, you know, list maintenance. I'm not going to ask how often you do that, Kelly, but some do it every 4 years, some 2 years. We had an incident back in March. I'm just sharing with you why it is so very frustrating. Up in Orange County, you have all these students at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill doing early voting. I happened to be there on that day. I just happened to leave, you know, right before it happened. I was monitoring this exact polling site. Students were going in there, and they were told that they were inactive. So they had to vote provisional ballot. There was one young man who got up there, and he said, no, it doesn't sound right. I think I'm going to go home and call my mom. He went back to his dorm room, called his mom, who was a poll worker. And she said, no. She said, you were inactive. All they needed to do was ask you, had you moved out of the county? And you haven't, so they needed to reinstate you. And so she called our office and told us about it. And so we called Orange County and said, what's going on up there, y'all? Just so happens it was at that one particular site It was one poll worker who just didn't know the statutes. So she was forcing everybody to, and she didn't know how to reinstate someone. And she wasn't told that that was something that she had to do. So for half the day, you know, until we were able to get up with the director, all these people went in and they were forced to vote a provisional ballot. And so we made sure that we went on and counted those ballots. So what I'm saying is, yes ma'am.
So they voted a provisional ballot of their vote counted? They
Well,
were
we just
reviewed-
made it count immediately, as, you know, is what I'm saying. We just went in and just made sure they were reinstated and that they were.
Well, but nobody lost their vote.
No, no, no. But that is the issue of knowing the law and making sure that immediately someone is reinstated because they didn't move out of the county, and that their vote counts right then. And that's important to voters, is that their vote counts right then when they cast that vote. They just feel comfortable when they leave. People feel very uncomfortable when they leave after counting a provisional ballot, because provisional is a bad word. You know, it's an unsafe word. It's never been trusted. Since years ago, back during the time of, who was that? Used to be, he was Vice President Gore, way back. It's just never been trusted again. So, okay, we talked about list maintenance. This is what I'm talking about, voting assistance. The law states that any registered voter, not some, not handicapped, it states any registered voter who is qualified to vote in the election shall be entitled to assistance with entering and exiting the voting booth, look, and in preparing ballots. So any registered voter, anybody who wants to go to the polls and say, you know what, I love to go and vote, but this process I found difficult. I get nervous when I get in the voting booth. I just want somebody to go. I feel more comfortable when I go in there with me. It says you can do that simply because you want to, and you've got the right to as a registered voter, okay? But the person who goes in there with you has got to be a near relative. So who's the near relative? We read off a list of the near relatives who are on that form, who was on this form of request for an absentee ballot. The name of near relatives are in there, and that's who they are. So that gives us ample help at the polls. Okay. Now, you know, I'm just going to tell you, I'm from a culture, where generally, you know, in church, we like to, you know, our elderly mothers of the church, you know, we've always enjoyed, don't read a lot, don't do a lot of research on candidates or whatever, and we depend upon our daughters, our nieces, and other people to tell us, honey, make me a list of who I need to vote for. You know, when I go to the, when I get to the polling site, and that's my business if that's what I want to do. If I want my relatives to tell me who to vote for, that's my right. Okay, that's what I want. I used to do it for my mom all the time. Baby, let's go to the polls. You know, and that's, you know, they got other things to do rather than spend time focusing on who's running. And so, my mother could take me to the polls, and I could go with her into the booth. Baby, here's the ballot. Yep, you go to the ballot. You want me to check it for your mama? Sure, go ahead. Okay, we have prepared that ballot. Okay? And my mother has voted her ballot with my assistance. And before my mama did pass, that's what we did. Okay? And we enjoyed that experience. And so, any registered voter has the right, entitled to, take someone with them into the voting booth. Now, our director, and I'm so glad she did this, because people have been playing around with that law for too long. Our executive director took the step to send out a memo to every director of the county boards of elections And this basically, in that memo, this is the part that I copied because I really liked it. She said, the voter need not be disabled in order to receive assistance from his or her near relatives. An election official should avoid prying or overly probative questions regarding the preference for assistance. She had to do that. Why? Because across this state, it's been happening at the voting sites. I had an elderly woman call and tell me that, and we took care of that. She called to tell me that she went to the polls with her sister because she couldn't read. And that Yancey would not allow her to take her sister with her into the voting booth. And so her sister walked away, and she went to the voting booth, but she couldn't read the ballot. So you know what she did? She turned around, and she walked out the door. And she said, Dr. Cooley, if I'd have voted that ballot, I wouldn't have known who I was voting for. I might have voted for somebody that I didn't even know. But this is the thing about it. Didn't nobody offer her assistance either. Even though they did not interpret the law the way it was supposed to. It didn't make sense because, first of all, she was disabled. Okay? But secondly, nobody offered her assistance. You know, so we want to make sure that people know the law and that they can utilize help. Now, the law goes on to say, in addition to any registered voter, if a person is disabled, meaning they're blind, they're illiterate, they're unable to enter the voting booth without assistance, or unable to mark that ballot, if you're one of those persons who is a registered voter, then you can ask help from anybody that you want to. Doesn't have to be a near relative. You can take your neighbor with you to the polls. You can get to the poll site and see somebody you know and say, I want you, as long as you point that person out. You can ask a polling worker for assistance. Okay? All right. I'm sorry. I get excited, y'all. Excuse me. Get excited when I'm doing these presentations. Okay. Auto mark. Y'all, I'm going to tell you. Here I am. Go to the polls. Been voting all my life. Didn't know what that machine was, sitting all the way over there in the corner. Or in the back. Did y'all ever heard of auto mark? I hadn't. And so when we had a conference back in August, with all the directors and county boards of elections, one of my coworkers said, Lee, you need to add auto mark to your presentation. I said, I don't know what auto mark is. They said, I'm going to send it to you. So they sent it to me, and I saw that machine. I said, I seen that at the polling site. They said, yeah, girl. I said, well, what does it do? They said it counts. So a person who is blind, can't read, can't mark a ballot, they can sit down at the auto mark machine, talk back and forth and vote that way. It is so wonderful. However, what I also found out was that, and Kelly, you correct me if I'm wrong, is that the election officials are not required by law to tell someone when they come in that the auto mark machine is available. Is that true?
I don't know if there's a law.
Right, okay. So that's what I'm told, that they're not required by law to inform people. And I have found out since that August 8th that, that, you know, many counties don't. And why don't they? Is it because they don't care? No, that's not it. That's not it. It is because during election time, people are just trying to get volunteers to work the polls. And if you're going to use the auto mark machine, you got to pull somebody from over here to work the auto mark machine. And And so unless somebody asks for it, some counties just don't readily make it available. Doesn't mean that they don't care, but I think it's good for people to know that it's available. Yes, sir.
I'm glad you brought this up because at one of our colleges here in the county, there is a blind student who will be going to the course, but
Okay, good, good.
I will share that with friends.
Great, great. And for those of you that just came in, I asked everybody to put their name and their email address there so that I can email you this PowerPoint, rather than you sit and take notes, because I want us to be able to have discussion as we go through. Okay, great. Talk a little bit about the curbside voting. Curbside voting is a form of absentee voting. And someone asked me, well, Dr. Cooley, can we participate in curbside voting as a group? And the answer is yes. Yes, indeed you can. The law does not specify the type of vehicle that can be used in curbside voting. Neither does the law specify the number of persons that can be in a vehicle for curbside voting. Therefore, you can use a car, you can use a van, you can use a school bus, you can use a 60-passenger bus, okay? And bring those disabled persons to curbside voting. However, what I tell people, it only makes sense, and it's a matter of respect, that if you're going to take a busload of folk to a polling site, please call your local county board of elections. Let them know the day and the time and the site where this bus will be going. That's a matter of respect. Respect for the election officials who are going to be working that site. And respect for the director, so the director can make sure she gets enough volunteers to come in on that particular day to that particular site so things can run smoothly. For her to be able to keep order. Okay? It's also a matter of respect for the persons on that bus, so that they are served in a manner that is comfortable for them. Remember, curbside voting is for the elderly and the disabled. So we just want it to be a comfortable experience for everybody. So therefore, just call your local county board of elections and say, we're coming on such and such a day. That also applies to souls to the polls, okay? After church on Sunday. If you know that a congregation of 150 is going over to this particular site, it's a good thing to let your local county board of election know that our church is going to such and such on this particular Sunday, okay? So that they can be prepared. It'll be a wonderful experience for the Board of Elections and for the voters. Okay? Great. Now somebody also asked me, will my disability be challenged? Nope. If you're on that bus, nobody can come and challenge you and say, well, what is your disability? You don't look disabled to me. If you're in that car, know your disability cannot be challenged. Okay. Request for an absentee ballot. We're going back to the request for an absentee ballot. Those requests can be mailed, they can be faxed, they can be scanned in and emailed, or they can be personally delivered. They just got to be in by 5 p.m. on November 1st. Now suppose November 1st gets here and an emergency happens. Uh-oh. You meant to mail it, but you didn't. You meant to fax it in, but you didn't. And you just knew that you were going to get there on November 1st by 5 p.m. Well, the law has made an allowance for you. But only if it was an emergency. Okay. So it's due by 5 o'clock p.m. on November 1st. But if something happened to you on November 1st, you were planning to get there, but you got in a car accident, or your baby got sick and you had to get that baby to the hospital, it had to be an emergency, then the law allows the director to make an allowance for you, and she'll accept that on the next business day. All right. Okay, we already know that anybody can vote absentee. We know that, right? It's not for the disabled only. Okay. Now remember that in order to request an absentee ballot, you gotta already be registered. Okay? So, now what if somebody does not send in their voter registration form by 5 p.m. on October 14th? Now that's the last day for regular voter registration. Well, if your voter registration form is not in by 5 p.m. on October 14th, you can't vote absentee. You can't request a ballot to come to your house. It just can't happen because you ain't registered. So what you'll have to do is you have to go to early voting. You still have an option, but it won't be an absentee ballot coming out to you. You still have that option, and that is voter registration and voting on the same day during early voting. Thank you. That clipboard is a roster of names and email addresses. Because what we're doing is we're having discussion as I go through the PowerPoint. And so you get to focus on our discussion and what's up there, and you'll get the PowerPoint via your email address so that you can go back and read it and, you know, pay more attention to the details. Now, a person can indeed complete a voter registration form and a request for an absentee ballot, and attach that absentee ballot, that request for an absentee ballot, to the back of your voter registration form, and then put it in the mail. And once it is received, you first be registered, and after you get registered, they'll follow up with that ballot. Okay? So an absentee ballot cannot be requested over the phone, and you can't send or fax a letter to the County Board of Elections saying, send me an absentee ballot. It can only be received via the request for an absentee ballot. It's got to be on this form. Okay? Now that form, again, can be mailed or faxed or delivered personally or sent electronically. You scan it in and send it via email to your local county board of elections. We get a lot of requests for an absentee ballot because when I go around the state, that's what I'm given. It has our address and fax number and all that up there. I always tell people, send it in to your local county board of elections. And so we always have a stack at our office that we're faxing to the local county board to make sure they get them. But it's supposed to go to your local county board. It makes it easier for them to get them directly. But if we happen to get them, we will send them to where they need to go. Now, one thing that I tell people is, now, I like to, sometimes people get confused. I can say it is confusing. So I like, when I give somebody a form, I kind of like to explain to them, not just the form, but I like to explain to them what they're going to get when they get that ballot. Because that ballot's kind of scary. Not the ballot itself, but just the envelope, y'all. So what I advise people to do, and here again, another night, Kelly, that I leave the envelope in my car. Another night, it's out there. I'm always forgetting something. But what I tell people if you're going to talk to people about requesting an absentee ballot to vote absentee to make sure that everybody votes, you need to request an absentee ballot for yourself. Okay? So that you know what you're talking about. So that when they get that ballot in the mail, they're not like Sister Sarah at my church who called me to my Dr. Cooley, I don't know what to do with this thing. I'm going to throw it in the trash can. It's too much stuff. I'm confused. You know, and I call her back, and when I call her back, I can say, Sister Sarah, do you see that yellow, that highlighted area? You see what I'm saying? So now, there's a lot of writing on the back of those envelopes. Now, I don't know what the envelopes in Pasquotank County look like. But in my county, the signature line is highlighted. Yours too? Okay, okay, great, wonderful. And so, that lets Miss Sarah know, not only do we need your signature and your information, those other two highlighted areas is two other people's signatures. Because the ballot is simply, what I tell people is a notary costs money. Just go to this neighbor over here, then go next door to this neighbor over here, and get them to sign it. Or if you got relatives in the household, adults, you can utilize those relatives in the household. Okay? But it's just a good thing if you're going to participate in this process of trying to get everybody involved and helping everybody understand the absentee ballot, because some people just don't get out, but they will vote if they can get an absentee ballot. Know what they're going to get so you can explain it to them. So when they call you up on the phone because they're confused, you know what to tell them. Okay. Also, that request for an absentee ballot also updates your record. Okay? So, it's good. If you haven't changed your address or whatever you're going to vote absentee, this updates your record. Whatever you put on here updates your voter registration record. Okay? All right. Oh, I think we talked about this already. A qualified voter who desires to vote by absentee. We've talked about that in detail. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to switch over to voter registration drives because everybody's doing them. Okay. One point I want to point out is, you got your table. I'm doing a voter registration drive. I'm going to do it right here in front of you. Okay. Here's my table. Over here on this side of my table is where I do voter registration forms. Over on this side of my table is where I do requests for an absentee ballot. Okay? No more picking up a rock off the ground, putting it on top of the paper to hold the forms down. Okay? No more just laying these forms in a cardboard box on top of the table. Right? These forms need to be in a plastic container with a lid. Any container is with a lid. See that? See this container? It's got a lid on it. It's closed. You put the information in there, nobody can look at it. So when you're doing a voter registration, you need to make sure at least a tote. You know those little plastic totes that you buy? You need a tote for the voter registration forms. You need a tote for the request for an absentee ballot. Those totes, the lid's open and they close. You need a roster. So over here on this end of the table, beside my tote for my voter registration forms, I have a roster. So when someone comes up to the table, they sign their name, they complete their voter registration form, I say thank you, I open that lid in their presence, I put the form in the box and I close it, and they know when they leave, my form is in that box, and ain't nobody looking at my personal information. And then the same over here for the request for an absentee ballot. You have a roster right beside that tote, and they write their name, they complete their request for an absentee ballot, and they put it in the box. But let me state, they may not want to put their request for an absentee ballot in the box. Okay? They may say, well, I'll send it in myself. That's fine if they want to do that. Now, if that person has completed a voter registration form and it's in this box over here, and they come over here and do a request for an absentee ballot, and they say, I'm going to take this home because, you know, I want to make sure this request gets in, guess what? They ain't going to get no absentee ballot. Why? Because they ain't registered to vote. Okay? So, if they're going to do that, then they might as well take their voter registration form along with their request for an absentee ballot. Take both of them on home with them and send them in the mail. Okay? That's the thing to do. And that's what you would suggest. Now suppose they want you to go on and follow through with it. Then after they have completed that request for an absentee ballot, their name is checked off on that roster. The person working this side of the table for the voter registration drive, can you please send me that request for an absentee ballot? You're going to take that request for an absentee ballot, attach it to the back of the voter registration form, okay? So that when this voter registration form goes into the local county board of elections, they will register them first. Oh, there is a request. Now that they are registered, let me send them an absentee ballot, okay? Because if you don't attach that request for an absentee ballot to this voter registration form, it might not ever make it to that voter registration form. Because when you get through with your request for an absentee ballot, you're going to take them all out of that box, you're going to compare them to that roster, make sure you have a form for everybody on that roster, and you're going to put them in an envelope by themselves. And you're going to do the same over here for all of these voter registration forms. And then they're going to be processed by Yokohama County Board of Elections. But if they get that request before they are processed over the voter registration, they can't get no ballot because they ain't registered yet. Okay? So that's what we need to do. The last thing I want to say about a voter registration drive is that you need to have a sign that is professional. I don't mean you got to pay a lot of money for it, okay? But voters have a right to know who's conducting the voter registration drive. They need to know if it's Mount Zion Missionary Circle who is conducting this voter registration drive. They need to know the name of the persons sitting at the table. And they need to have a follow-up phone number. If you can't give the name and address of your church and the telephone number, and if you can't give out your full name of the table that you're sitting at when you're taking in people's personal information, then you don't need to have a voter registration. You don't need to be sitting at that table, okay? They need to have your information so that if they have an issue, because they're going to go to voter lookup and see, am I registered yet? Okay? If they're not registered yet, you know what they're going to do? They're going to call Kelly and say, my name is not in there. Kelly said, well, your name is not in our system. But, you know, give us some time to work on this. Well, I went to Mount Zion Missionary Circle's voter registration drive and I spoke to Miss Lula Jones. And I have her phone number and she guaranteed me that she sent that in. Okay? So it makes voters feel comfortable knowing who they are talking to and knowing that they have a way to follow up. Because these are desperate, everybody knows, ain't no leader, you know, leave us lying. We're all excited about voting right now. And we're all concerned about our votes counting, okay? And so we want to have accurate information. And there are voter registration drives going on. They ain't got no sign at the table. We don't know who's conducting the drive. And people think that everybody's got the right intention because they're sitting at a table with some voter registration forms and some requests for an absentee ballot. And people's information is being utilized for inappropriate purposes and their paperwork is never going into the local county board of elections. It's just a time for people to be taken advantage of, and it's a time for people to just deceive, to make people think that they're registered to vote so that their vote won't count. It's just that time, y'all. It's just that time. It happens during the elections. So let us participate in the process in the way that it should be done, and let us be able to educate other people in the way that the process should be done. I'm going to talk about what churches and sororities and some other groups are doing. I'm just going to give an example. I need some water, but I didn't bring any. So excuse me for touching my mouth. My mouth is dry. Now, what are churches doing? What are fraternities and sororities doing? What are other grassroots organizations doing as far as getting people registered and getting them to vote? I've got a wonderful example that just really just pleases me. They're down in Charlotte and some other places. We have fraternities and sororities and community churches working together across denominations. Okay? So what they're doing is these groups get together on a Saturday morning because they've already planned their event. And they have fellowship breakfast at this church. Then they get in their vans and their cars and their trucks and all, and they go to this public housing community. And this car takes the front end. This next van takes the middle end. And then you got another car that takes this end. Then the other ones go to the public housing community on the other part of town over here. And then they split up. And so they're going door to door. And they're talking to the residents at the complex. They're going two to a door, not one. You got to go two to a door, okay? They have something to identify who they are, okay? And they're either talk through the door, and if the person trusts them, they'll open that door, and they talk to them about voting. And they're being able to get people who are not ordinarily getting out voting to complete a voter registration form. And if they don't complete the request for an absentee ballot, they'll say they're just at least leave it there. Well, just think about it. Just think about it. At least you have the form. You can send it in and you'll get the ballot. And then if you have a question about that ballot, look, here's my card, or here's our church number. Just call us if you got any questions. Then, at lunchtime, they meet back at another church, okay, who's a part of the group. And they discuss what the process was, what worked, what didn't, what do we need to change, and how do we make it better when we go back on next Saturday. So those are things that people are doing with public housing, with communities where elderly apartment complexes, just things of that nature. So there's all kind of things you can do. What are churches doing? Well, some are every Sunday morning. See, we're at that time now where you can't skip a Sunday. You gotta do it. You gotta do it every Sunday morning. Okay? And it sounds simple, but when you do something that's very simple, but you do it consistently, okay, it has an impact. So, every Sunday morning, some churches make sure that when the members and the visitors enter the door, when they receive a worship bulletin from the usher also says, do you need a voter registration form? Would you like a request for an absentee ballot? And so they get that while they're going in the door. They got a little time to think about whether they want to vote absentee or not. Now that's just one part of it. The other is every Sunday morning until election. This started back in June. So some people are getting tired, like at my church, for instance. Some people are getting tired of hearing me speak for 2 to 3 minutes every Sunday morning about voting. But after our announcer finishes her announcements for the morning, I step up into the pulpit and I spend 2 to 3 minutes saying something about voting. I cover a law or something, just for 2 or 3 minutes. Then I go on about my business. And so I call it my nugget for the day. And so every church needs to just have a nugget for the day. You got an entire PowerPoint that is coming to you. There's a lot of nuggets up there. And you can choose what's most important and just prevent a nugget for 2 to 3 minutes during morning announcements. Some churches make sure that it's written in their worship bulletin that in such and such conference room we have voter registration forms, and request for an absentee ballot. Please complete those forms after church. Sister so-and-so is responsible for taking up those forms and delivering to the local county board of elections prior to the next Sunday. Some have voter registration tables set up so that when church is over, there's somebody out there to answer their questions, to help them with the voter registration form and the request for an absentee ballot. And there's one person responsible for making sure that's delivered to the local county board of elections. So, that's a lot that people can do. I think for the most part, I have covered the most important things on here. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to make sure that everybody gets this PowerPoint. Okay? It is very, very important. That's only one of me. Okay? We have, let me just leave it like that. I can't get around the whole state. What's important to me is that the information gets around the whole state. So when I send it to you, you forward it to your group, your friends, your relatives, whoever you want to send it to. I'm at the point where I just want the information to get out there. And everybody getting my PowerPoint is the same as hearing me in person. Okay? So, do we have any questions before we close out? Because I'm going to let Kelly come forward. She's got a few things that she needs to talk about with passport tape. Yes, ma'am.
I have one question. If I'm a near relative, I qualify under the statutory definition. Am I able to fill out the ballot for the
You can vote that ballot for your relative, but y'all must be in agreement about that. You can't just decide, like, I can't just decide, my brother don't vote, so I'm going to go and get a ballot and vote it for him. You must be in agreement about that, okay? Because, you know, because he could decide that one day, you know what, this year I am going to go and vote. You must have had some discussion about it. The voter is giving you permission to do that. That's, you know, or you, that's just the way that you operate with that voter. Now, my brother likes to drink a little time. He ain't going to make it to early voting. He ain't going to make it to vote on election day. But every year he expects me to request an absentee ballot and vote the ballot for him. Sister, did I vote? That's what they call me. Sister, did I vote? Yes, you did. And everything is fine.
So I can fill out a ballot on behalf of somebody else if I qualify as a near relative?
Yes, ma'am. You can. Now, within the facilities, we have, it is against the law. I'm going to close out. I really am. Is it, what time is it? 8:15. So we're going to close out early because, see, you're supposed to end at 9. So I got a little bit more time now. Okay. It is against the law for anybody who works in a nursing home, a rest home, mental health clinic, substance abuse clinic, hospital, group home. If you work there, it's against the law for you to assist anybody who is a patient or resident in any of these facilities in the voting process. That means any help whatsoever. Now, you can go to jail. You know, charges can be pressed. And I know we think we're doing some good. I'm just saying it's against the law if you get caught. And what does that mean? That means tiptoeing into the room, leaving a request for the ballot on that chest right beside the bed, and going on back out your business. Because Sally over there saw you go in there, and I'm going to tell it on them, and I'm going to, you know. It's just that time, y'all. It's a very tense time. It's against the law. And if somebody tells it on you, you can lose your job. It's not worth that. Okay? So that's first of all, you can't even, yes, sir.
Even if it's a near relative?
Wait a minute, see, I'm gonna get there. Now, if you happen to work in one of those places, but you happen to be a near relative, then you can assist that patient that you are a near relative of in that facility, okay? If you happen to be a near relative. Otherwise, how do those persons in those facilities vote? They have near relatives, okay, who will request a ballot on their behalf. And they'll do it however they and their near relative prefer to do it. They may request the ballot, okay, because they're going to fill out this for their relative. Again, it has the voter's information here. We talked about this, we're talking about homeless persons. Now that daughter is filling out this request on behalf of her mom. She's going to put her mother's information, who is the voter. But the next section says, okay, that's the voter, that's where the voter lives, but where you want the ballot to go. Okay. That's what the next section asks. That daughter can say, I think I want the ballot to come to my house. Or that daughter can say, I think I want the ballot to go where mom is. Because mom may be in a facility. Okay. So that same address that is up here for mom is where that ballot is going to go. They may put the address there. Or they may put a P.O. box. Or they may put their own address. It's up to them. Then it's going to say, well, who are you? I'm the near relative. And I'm going to check this box because I am her daughter. I'm the child. And then I'm going to put in my information, who I am, my address, and sign it. So they know that this is the daughter requesting the ballot for mom. Okay? Now that ballot's going to go to wherever daughter says send it to. If daughter may say send it to the nursing facility. And maybe daughter and mother are going to work on it when she's spending time with mom over there at the nursing facility. Okay? Or maybe daughter says send the ballot to my house. And maybe daughter is just going to go on and vote that ballot because mom and daughter have discussed it. And the mom has said, baby, just go on and vote that ballot for me. Okay? It may be done that way. But the thing is, if you have a near relative in one of these facilities, you want to check, okay, and make sure that a ballot has not already been voted. Yes, ma'am.
Would you define near relative?
A near relative is, anybody who was on this form. There's a little brown boxes down there. It tells you who a near relative is, and that near relative is a spouse, a child, a son-in-law, a brother, a sister, a daughter-in-law, a grandchild, a parent, a stepchild, a grandparent, a mother-in-law, a father-in-law, and a step-parent.
Very clear, no cousins.
Yes, no cousins, no nieces,
Supposing if there's no one else,
no aunts and uncles.
other than, supposing if
There's a legal place for a legal guardian, which would be your power of attorney. Okay, you can do that.
So someone who happens to be in this position who has no relatives at all, how does that work?
Now, every local county board of elections, okay, is required to have a MAC team. That stands for Multi-Partisan Assistance Team, okay, who goes to these facilities to assist those persons in the facilities who want to vote but don't have a near relative who is working with them to assist them in that process, okay? And the director of the facilities are responsible for contacting the director of the local county board of elections, okay? Or if the director is not contacting this director, The voter themselves, if they are able, okay, can call the local county board of elections and say, I need somebody to come out here and help me, because I want to vote an absentee ballot, okay? Now, when that person calls the local county board of elections, the local county board of elections has 7 days to get to that facility to assist that voter. If they don't make it in 7 days, then that voter can ask anybody they want to for help, and you don't face any legal consequences because nobody got to them in a 7-day period. So now, okay, I'm going to ask somebody, one of these folk who work here, go get me that form, help me fill this form out, and have that ballot come to me. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
If you're not a near relative, but you visit someone who doesn't have any family at the nursing home, can you call the local board of elections and say this person's in the nursing home and needs assistance voting?
What's this? She's saying.
Okay.
Would you not put your information on that form? As
You
a
can't
person?
put your information if you're not a near relative.
What if you're helping someone else?
But you can't, by law, you can't request, you can help somebody, but you can't help them by signing your name on this paper, because you're not a near relative, by law.
What you do is you help them fill it out, maybe write it for them, but have them sign it.
Right, the signature coming in has to be from the voter or the near relative. Or the legal guardian or power of attorney.
No. Don't you have to have proof that there's a 7 day, that 7 days passed and you haven't got the information? Don't you have to prove that?
Who has to prove it? You,
Yes.
who's assisting?
You say, you're saying, well, they didn't respond to me in 7 days.
And you're
time.
saying that because you're saying the person who is in the facility may not be coherent enough to remember where they, or they have forgotten what day they called, and you don't know if the 7 days has expired. Well, I can just tell you what the law states. The law states 7 days. Now, if you're somebody who works in that facility and you don't want to get in trouble, I would call the local county board of elections and say, look, there's a patient here. The patient said they called 7 days ago, and they haven't heard anything from, it's been 7 days, and so now I'm going to help them. That's just all I would do. I would cover myself that way. And the county board of elections could tell you, well, we didn't get that call. We're going to go right out there because we don't recall getting that call. We don't have it listed, we don't have it on record or anything like that. Yes, sir.
Who's 7 days? Because if the resident said, I've called within 7 days, and then they turn around and come on the 8th day, for the Board of Election, it's 1 day, but for the resident, it's 8 days. Now, on 8 days, anybody can help me.
On the 8th day, that's
Right.
true.
And
Is
that
it,
gets
is
real-
it 7 days after the local board is contacted? Do they have 7 days to get someone there?
From the day that they contact.
So from the day the Board of Elections is contacted, not from the day that maybe they told someone in the facility to call?
No, they, even if,
sometimes request a certain day. Now, I work on the MAP team,
Okay.
and I talked to the lady who I'm going to be working with, and she says, can you come on Tuesday, this day and at this time?
And that
Because
is-
that's making it easier for them to get all of the people together, and they know their schedule.
Right. The 7 days only applies to the voter contacting the local board of elections. The 7 days does not apply to the director or anybody else. We're only talking about when the person who is in the facility picks up the phone and calls the local county board of elections and says, I need somebody to come out here to register me to vote or to help me vote an absentee ballot. When they hang up that phone, that's day 1.
okay,
Then you've got 6 more days. And if nobody has shown up, that's straight days. It ain't business days.
okay.
That's straight days. So after that 7th day expires, they can just go and ask somebody who works in the facility, bring me one of those requests for an absentee ballot. Okay, help me fill it out and let me sign it and send it in. At that point, you're no longer breaking the law.
Okay.
Okay.
But what I was asking is key. Because if it's been 7 days, and then you turn around and the Board of Elections says, oh, we're gonna be out there tomorrow, or we're gonna be out there this afternoon.
Well, if they happen to show up and nobody's helped them, it is what it is. But if you have helped them on that 8th day, it doesn't matter, you're not gonna get in trouble. That just means they don't have anything to do when they get there.
Okay. Good.
Most of the time, the facility directors are the ones contacting those, not the voters that are in the facilities.
So that's very seldom an issue. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, okay.
Next week for another one.
Okay.
They request the days.
Okay. Okay.
And I'll be going back.
Okay. Now, with all that being said, I don't know if I just said this, but I want to make sure that if you have a relative in one of those facilities, it's very wise, you know, if you're, you know, to call your relative to say, did anybody there, have you voted yet? You know, did you request an absentee ballot? Because even if you are in agreement with your relative, if y'all have decided this is the way you're going to do it, sometimes they forget. And somebody will bring them a form even though it's against the law. And they'll help them fill this out and they will have them sign it and they'll send it in and the ballot will come to the facility and your mama already voted. Okay? That's why it's good to have voters look up. Okay. Are there any more questions? Okay, I will make sure that everybody gets this PowerPoint and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kelly Price, Director of the Local County Board of Elections.